Kanye West, aka Ye, has paid for an ad in the Wall Street Journal to apologize for his past anti-Semitic remarks. In this open letter, he says, "To those I've hurt, 25 years ago, I was in a car accident that broke my jaw and caused injury to the right frontal lobe of my brain. At the time, the focus was on the visible damage, the fracture, the swelling, and the immediate physical trauma. The deeper injury, the one inside my skull, went unnoticed. Comprehensive scans were not done, neurological exams were limited, and the possibility of a frontal lobe injury was never raised. It wasn't properly diagnosed until 2023. That medical oversight caused serious damage to my mental health and led to my bipolar type 1 diagnosis. Bipolar disorder comes with its own defense system, denial. When you're manic, you don't think you're sick, you think everyone else is overreacting. You feel like you're seeing the world more clearly than ever, when in reality, you're losing your grip entirely. Once people label you as crazy, you feel as if you cannot contribute anything meaningful to the world. It's easy for people to joke and laugh it off, when in fact, this is a very serious, debilitating disease you can die from. According to the World Health Organization and Cambridge University, people with bipolar disorder have a life expectancy that is shortened by 10 to 15 years on average, and a 2 to 3 times higher all-cause mortality rate than the general population. This is on par with severe heart disease, type 1 diabetes, HIV, and cancer, all lethal and fatal if left untreated. The scariest thing about this disorder is how persuasive it is when it tells you you don't need help. It makes you blind, but convinced you have insight. You feel powerful, certain, unstoppable. I lost touch with reality. Things got worse the longer I ignored the problem. I said and did things I deeply regret. Some of the people I love the most, I treated the worst. You endured fear, confusion, humiliation, and the exhaustion of trying to have someone who was, at times, unrecognizable. Looking back, I became detached from my true self. In that fractured state, I gravitated toward the most destructive symbol I could find, the swastika, and even sold t-shirts bearing it. One of the most difficult aspects of having bipolar type 1 are the disconnected moments, many of which I still cannot recall, that led to poor judgment and reckless behavior that oftentimes feels like an out-of-body experience. I regret and am deeply mortified by my actions in that state and am committed to accountability, treatment, and meaningful change. It does not excuse what I did though. I am not a Nazi or an anti-Semite. I love Jewish people. To the Black community, which has held me down through all of the highs and lows and the darkest of times, the Black community is unquestionably the foundation of who I am. I am so sorry to have let you down. I love us. In early 2025, I fell into a 4-month-long manic episode of psychotic, paranoid, and impulsive behavior that destroyed my life. As the situation became increasingly unsustainable, there were times I didn't want to be here anymore. Having bipolar disorder is notable as a state of constant mental illness. When you go into a manic episode, you are ill at that point. When you are not in an episode, you are completely normal. And that's when the wreckage from the illness hits the hardest. Hitting rock bottom a few months ago, my wife encouraged me to finally get help. I have found comfort in Reddit forums of all places. Different people speak of being in manic or depressive episodes of a similar nature. I read their stories and realized that I was not alone. It's not just me who ruins their entire life once a year despite taking meds every day and being told by the so-called best doctors in the world that I am not bipolar but merely experiencing symptoms of autism. My words as a leader in my community have global impact and influence. In my mania, I lost complete sight of that. As I find my new baseline and new center through an effective regime of medication, therapy, exercise, and clean living, I have newfound, much-needed clarity. I am pouring my energy into positive, meaningful art, music, clothing, design, and other new ideas to help the world. I'm not asking for sympathy or a free pass, though I aspire to earn your forgiveness. I write today simply to ask for your patience and understanding as I find my way home. With love, Ye. Now, I myself am not Jewish. I'm not a member of the Jewish community, so I don't feel like it's for me to forgive or not forgive Kanye. What I will say for my own part is I do feel like Kanye's actions in the midst of his several breakdowns and tirades and just downward spirals that we've seen over the past however many years, because early 2025 was definitely the worst that we've seen. But even before that, there had been a lot of very scary, I would say, episodes, very destructive episodes that we publicly saw Kanye, aka Ye, go through. And I'll just say, for my part, as disturbing and harmful as many of his actions were, I always saw it in this light. To me, it seemed very clear that it was someone experiencing a manic state, experiencing bipolar 1. I feel like if you know anybody in your own personal life, which I know a few who are diagnosed with and who deal with bipolar, Kanye's behavior was very familiar. That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who is afflicted with bipolar is going to deal in anti-Semitic conspiracies, but conspiratorial thinking, paranoia, is very regularly a part of this type of diagnosis. It's, again, it doesn't always have to be anti-Semitic, but just the general behavior and just psychosis that Kanye seemed to be in felt very obviously stemming from some type of mental disorder, most likely bipolar. And so what he is reflecting here, and even the way he's tying it back to his car crash from the early 2000s, it does make a lot of sense. Again, I am not in any place to forgive him. I'm not a member of the Jewish community. I'm not a member of the Black community either, who Kanye, has put out a lot of statements and comments, and even some of the merch he was selling with the whole White Lives Matter stuff. He's definitely been harmful to the African American and Black community as well. So it's up to individual members of those communities to determine how much they feel like they can forgive Ye. But I do think that what he explains here is very obviously what was happening and what was spurring these episodes from him. And it's interesting that this is coming out now, just a few days after we had this very visible incident where a bunch of far-right and just misogynist influencers like Andrew Tate, Sneeko, Nick Fuentes, you had Myron from Fresh and Fit, you had, what's the new guy's name, Clavicular or something. I think they're all losers personally, all morons, but you had all these guys out partying, and they were playing Kanye's band Hail Hitler song, both on the way to the event and at the club itself. And this was a whole viral incident. And so I feel like, although this statement from Kanye feels like, step one of him trying to come back into people's good graces, when we see the repercussions of his actions still, causing harm. Because if people can trivialize this or joke about it, but if you're a Jewish person, if you're someone who, would be heavily afflicted by Nazi ideology, and you're hearing people play Hail Hitler songs at a club or in an Uber or wherever, that is the scary sign of living through times where far-right and Nazi ideology is bubbling up again and becoming somewhat mainstream on the American right. And so we definitely, there needs to be more action and more consistent action that comes from Ye, in my opinion, in order for him to start to potentially redeem the harm that he has caused. Because again, he's become used, and his, not only his music, but his merch, all this stuff has become used as a symbol of Nazism, white supremacy, which is obviously ironic coming from one of the most famous African American artists of all time. But yeah, I do think this is notable for him not just to apologize, because an apology is one thing, but for him to give this detailed explanation of how his mental health and his brain trauma has played into it. Again, it does make a lot of sense. I think, again, forgiveness, that's not for me to make, but I just do think that given the fact that his anti-Semitic downward spiral is still having reverberating effects like this, I do think we need to see more action and comments and disavowals of this kind of stuff, and probably some donations to fighting anti-Semitism, fighting racism, and at the end of the day, Kanye is a human, and if he's still dealing with his mental health, I'm sure, he can't just do it all at once. But I think we do need to see more action from him going forward. But I did think this was an interesting statement. The fact that he took out a full ad in the Wall Street Journal to do this means he wants it to be very visible. But again, hopefully this is just the start of his redemption arc.